The rain had stopped an hour ago, but Naomi stood across the street from Celestial, the most expensive restaurant in the city, watching water drip from the awning above her. Her brown skin glowed under the bright streetlights, and her natural curls were pulled back in a sleek bun. She wore a simple black coat, but underneath was a designer dress she'd bought that morning. Not for Julian. Never again for Julian. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows she could see him clearly. Her husband. No, her ex-husband as of 3 hours ago. Julian sat at the best table in the house, the one that overlooked the city skyline. Beside him was Bianca, the woman he'd been sleeping with for the past year. Bianca wore red, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. She was laughing, touching Julian's hand, and he was smiling that smile Naomi used to think was meant only for her. They were celebrating. Champagne in crystal glasses. The most expensive bottle on the menu, Naomi knew. Julian always ordered the same thing when he felt victorious. The bubbles caught the light as they raised their glasses and clinked them together. Bianca leaned in and kissed him. Right there in public. Right there where anyone could see. Naomi's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from her lawyer, Patricia. It's done. Everything is official. Are you sure you want to be there watching this? Naomi typed back quickly, I need to see it. I need to remember this moment. Because this moment, this exact scene of Julian celebrating what he thought was his victory, would fuel her for everything that came next. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd outsmarted her. He told her during their last conversation before the final court date that she should be grateful he was even giving her anything at all. You didn't build this empire, he'd said. I did. You just stood beside me and looked pretty. Those words had cut deep. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of supporting his dreams, entertaining his clients, managing their home, and sacrificing her own career ambitions. And he reduced her to nothing more than decoration. But Julian had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated her. He'd thought she was too hurt, too broken, too emotional to think clearly. He'd thought she would just sign whatever papers he put in front of her and disappear quietly into the background of his life. Naomi watched as a waiter brought their food. Lobster for both of them. Another celebration choice. Bianca fed Julian a bite from her fork and he laughed. The sound didn't reach Naomi through the glass, but she could imagine it. That deep, rumbling laugh he used to share with her. Her phone buzzed again. Patricia, the transfers are complete. Check your account. Naomi opened her banking app. The number that appeared on the screen made her breath catch. Not from shock, she'd known it was coming, but from the reality of it. $47 million. Just the liquid assets. The real wealth was in the companies, the properties, the investments that were now under her control. She looked back up at the restaurant. Julian had no idea yet. He wouldn't find out until Monday morning when he tried to access his accounts. When he tried to walk into his office and found the locks had been changed. When he called his business partners and discovered they now reported to her. The divorce papers he'd signed, the ones he'd barely read because his lawyer assured him everything was in his favor, had been very different from what he'd assumed. Patricia had crafted them carefully, using every piece of evidence Naomi had gathered over the past 6 months. Evidence of adultery. Evidence of hidden assets. Evidence of fraud. Most importantly, evidence that Naomi's family money had funded Julian's first major business deal, the one that had launched his entire empire. Mrs. Harris? A voice beside her made Naomi turn. A young couple stood there, the woman looking concerned. Are you okay? You've been standing in the rain. Naomi looked down. She hadn't noticed she was standing in a puddle. Her shoes were soaked. But she smiled at the couple. I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm free. The couple looked confused but smiled back and walked away. Naomi took one last look at Julian and Bianca. They were holding hands now, talking closely. Bianca was probably already planning how she'd redecorate his penthouse. How she'd spend his money. How she'd be the new Mrs. Julian Harris. Let her plan. Let her dream. By Monday there would be no money to spend. No penthouse to redecorate. No empire to be the queen of. Naomi turned and walked to where her car was parked. A sleek black sedan, brand new, paid for in cash that morning. As she slid into the leather seat, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her dark brown eyes looked different. Stronger. Fiercer. She pulled out her phone and called Simone, her best friend who'd been by her side through everything. Did you see it? Simone answered immediately. I saw it. How do you feel? Naomi started the car and pulled out into traffic. The city lights blurred past as she drove, and for the first time in a year, she felt like she could breathe. I feel like I just won the biggest battle of my life. That's because you did, honey. That's because you did. As Naomi drove home to her new apartment, the one Julian didn't know about yet, she thought about the 6 months of planning that had led to this moment. The late nights with Patricia, going over every detail. The days of pretending everything was fine while gathering evidence. The moment she discovered Julian's affair and made the choice not to cry, not to scream, but to plan. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Naomi Harris? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Speaking. This is Jennifer Cole from Cole Enterprises. We received your investment proposal last week. I'm calling to tell you we'd like to move forward. When can you come in to discuss details? Naomi smiled. Cole Enterprises was one of the biggest tech companies on the East Coast. She'd sent them a proposal using her maiden name, not wanting Julian's name attached to her new ventures. I'm available Monday morning. Perfect. 9 a.m.? I'll be there. When she hung up, Naomi felt a surge of excitement. This was just the beginning. She'd spent 12 years being Julian's wife, living in his shadow. Now she was going to build something of her own. Something he could never touch. Something he could never take credit for. She pulled into the parking garage of her new building. The apartment was on the 20th floor with windows that overlooked the river. She'd furnished it herself, choosing every piece with care. No more living with Julian's choices. No more pretending to like things she hated. As she rode the elevator up, Naomi thought about Monday. About the look on Julian's face when he realized what had happened. Part of her wished she could be there to see it. But Patricia had advised against any contact. Let him figure it out on his own, she'd said. Let him feel the same confusion and betrayal you felt when you discovered his affair. The elevator doors opened, and Naomi walked down the hall to her apartment. Inside, everything was quiet, peaceful. She kicked off her wet shoes and walked to the window. The city spread out before her, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Julian was still celebrating. Still thinking he'd won. Still thinking Bianca loved him for who he was and not what he had. He'd find out the truth soon enough. About Bianca. About the divorce settlement. About everything he'd lost. But that was his problem now. Naomi had her own life to build. Her own empire to create. Her own happiness to discover. She pulled out her laptop and opened the folder labeled New Ventures. Inside were dozens of business proposals, investment opportunities, and plans she'd been developing for months. Patricia had connected her with some of the best business consultants in the country. Women who'd helped her understand that she had a mind for this, a talent she'd never explored because she'd been too busy supporting Julian. As Naomi reviewed her plans, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Oh, excitement. The thrill of possibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Get some rest. Monday is going to be a big day. Naomi smiled and texted back. I don't think I can sleep. I'm too excited. Try anyway. You're going to need your energy. Trust me. Naomi set her phone down and walked to her bedroom. The bed was new, the sheets expensive and soft. She'd bought everything herself with her own money. Well, money that was legally hers now. Money that Julian thought he'd hidden well enough. As she changed into pajamas and climbed into bed, Naomi thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. That woman had been devastated when she discovered Julian's affair. She'd cried for days. She'd blamed herself. She'd wondered what she'd done wrong. But then something had shifted. She'd stopped crying and started thinking. She'd stopped blaming herself and started gathering evidence. She'd stopped wondering what she'd done wrong and started planning what she'd do right. That woman was gone now. In her place was someone stronger. Someone smarter. Someone who knew her worth and wouldn't let anyone diminish it again. Naomi closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Her mind was too active, thinking about Monday, about the future, about all the possibilities that lay ahead. She'd spent 12 years of her life with Julian. Now she had the rest of her life to spend on herself. And she was going to make every single moment count. 6 months earlier, Naomi had been a different person. She'd woken up that Tuesday morning the same way she'd woken up every morning for 12 years, next to Julian in their king-sized bed in their penthouse apartment. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and she'd stretched, feeling content. Julian was already up, probably in his home office. He always woke early to check the markets, make calls to international clients, review reports. Naomi had learned his routine by heart. She'd gotten up, showered, and was planning to surprise him with breakfast when she'd noticed his phone on the nightstand. It wasn't like Julian to forget his phone. He treated it like an extra limb. She picked it up, planning to take it to him when it had buzzed with a text message. The preview on the lock screen had made her freeze. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? The sender was listed as B. Naomi had stood there holding the phone, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Her hands had started shaking. She told herself it could be innocent. Maybe a business contact. Maybe a misunderstanding. But she'd known. Deep in her gut, she'd known. She'd set the phone back down exactly where she'd found it. Then she'd walked to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection had looked the same as always, brown skin smooth and clear, natural curls still messy from sleep, dark eyes wide and uncertain. But inside, everything had changed. The old Naomi would have confronted Julian immediately. Would have screamed and cried and demanded answers. But something had stopped her. Maybe it was the calm way the text had been written, suggesting this wasn't new. Maybe it was the way Julian had been distant lately, always on his phone, always with excuses for late nights. Maybe it was the memory of her mother's voice years ago telling her, if a man ever betrays you, don't react. Plan. So Naomi had gotten dressed, gone downstairs, and made coffee like nothing had happened. When Julian had emerged from his office, she'd smiled and kissed his cheek. Good morning. Morning. He'd barely looked at her, already scrolling through his tablet. I have meetings all day. Don't wait up for me tonight. Okay. Should I plan dinner for one? Yeah. I'll probably grab something at the office. Another lie. She'd known it even then. But she just nodded and watched him leave. The moment the door had closed, Naomi had called the one person she knew could help. Patricia Drummond was the best divorce lawyer in the state, known for her aggressive tactics and her ability to find hidden assets. They'd met at a charity gala years ago and had stayed in touch. Patricia? This is Naomi Harris. I need to see you today. It's urgent. Patricia had fit her in that afternoon. In her office, surrounded by law books and framed court victories, Naomi had told her everything. About the text. About Julian's behavior. About her suspicions. Patricia had listened carefully, taking notes. When Naomi finished, Patricia had leaned back in her chair. Here's what you need to understand. If we move too fast, Julian will hide assets. Men like him always do. They have offshore accounts, shell companies, properties and other names. If you confront him now, he'll lawyer up and protect everything. So what do? You gather evidence. You document everything. You become a detective in your own marriage. Patricia had pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. This is a list of things I need you to do. Can you handle it? Naomi had looked at the list. Install tracking software on his phone if possible. Photograph important documents. Record conversations. Track his movements. Access his computer files. It had felt wrong. Like a violation. But then she'd thought about that text message. Last night was incredible. Julian had already violated their marriage. She was just protecting herself. I can handle it, she'd said. And she had. For the next 6 months, Naomi had become someone she'd never imagined. She'd learned how to install spyware on Julian's phone by borrowing it for just a second while he was in the shower. She'd learned how to access his computer remotely. She'd learned how to follow him without being noticed. What she'd discovered had been worse than she'd imagined. The woman was named Bianca Montgomery. She was 28, 10 years younger than Naomi. She worked in marketing at one of Julian's companies. He'd been seeing her for almost a year. They had a regular routine, Tuesday and Thursday nights at her apartment, weekend trips when he claimed to be on business. But the affair wasn't the worst part. As Naomi had dug deeper into Julian's files, she discovered something else. He'd been systematically hiding assets for years. Not from her, he hadn't been planning a divorce back then, but from the IRS. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Shell companies in Delaware. Properties purchased under false names. Naomi had photographed everything. Every document, every email, every text message. She'd stored it all in a secure cloud account that Julian couldn't access. She'd also discovered something that had changed the entire game. Julian's first major deal, the one that had launched his business empire, had been funded by Naomi's father. Before her father had passed away 5 years ago, he'd given Julian $3 million as an investment in their future. Julian had never paid it back. Instead, he'd used it to leverage bigger deals, building company after company. Naomi had found the original loan documents in her father's old files. Her mother had kept everything in storage after he died. The documents clearly stated the money was a loan, not a gift, and was to be repaid with interest within 10 years. Julian had never mentioned these documents. He'd probably hoped they'd been destroyed. He'd certainly acted like the business empire was entirely his creation. Patricia had been thrilled when Naomi had shown her. This changes everything. We can argue that you have a claim to a significant portion of his assets. Your family money built his empire. Over those 6 months, Naomi had also learned things about herself. She'd discovered she was good at this, at investigating, at planning, at staying calm under pressure. She'd discovered she had a mind for business that she'd never explored. As she'd read through Julian's files, understanding his deals and strategies, she'd realized she could do this too. Maybe even better. She'd started attending business seminars using a fake name. She'd read every book she could find about investing, corporate strategy, and wealth management. She'd networked quietly, making connections Julian didn't know about. And through it all, she'd pretended. Every morning she'd kiss Julian goodbye. Every evening when he came home, she'd asked about his day. She'd attended his business dinners and smiled at his colleagues. She'd even had dinner with Bianca once at a company event, making small talk while knowing exactly who this woman was. The hardest part had been the physical intimacy. Julian still wanted her sometimes, when Bianca wasn't available or when he wanted to maintain the appearance of a normal marriage. Naomi had forced herself to go through the motions, hating every second but knowing she couldn't raise suspicion. 3 months in, Naomi had met with Patricia again. They'd laid out all the evidence on a conference room table. Text messages, photos, financial documents, tracking data. It had painted a clear picture of betrayal and fraud. "This is good," Patricia had said. "This is really good. With this, we can get you at least 60% of everything. Maybe more." "I don't want just the money," Naomi had said. "I want the businesses. I want control." Patricia had looked surprised. "That's ambitious. Most women in your position just want the settlement and to move on." "I'm not most women." Naomi had picked up a file showing one of Julian's companies. "I've been studying these businesses. I understand them. And I know I can run them better than he can. He's been making risky decisions, ignoring good advice, thinking he's untouchable. I want to take over before he destroys what's been built." Patricia had smiled. "Then that's what we'll fight for." They'd spent the next 3 months building an airtight case. Patricia had brought in forensic accountants who traced every dollar Julian had hidden. They'd hired private investigators who documented the affair in detail. They'd consulted with business analysts who'd assessed the value of every company and asset. And Naomi had continued to play the perfect wife. She'd gone to company retreats and smiled for photos. She'd hosted dinner parties and charmed clients. She'd acted like everything was fine even as her heart had been breaking. There had been moments when she'd almost cracked. Like the night she'd overheard Julian on the phone with Bianca, telling her he loved her. Or the morning she'd found expensive jewelry in his car that wasn't for her. Or the evening he told her he had to work late, and she tracked him to a hotel downtown. But each time she'd remembered her goal. Revenge wasn't about emotion. It was about strategy. Finally, after 6 months of preparation, Patricia had said they were ready. "We file tomorrow. Are you sure you want to do this?" Naomi had thought about the past 12 years. About sacrificing her own dreams to support Julian's. About the lonely nights when he was with Bianca. About the way he'd dismissed her opinions and ignored her contributions. About how he'd taken her father's money and built an empire, then acted like it was all his doing. "I'm sure," she'd said. "Let's destroy him." The next morning, Julian had been served with divorce papers at his office. In front of his employees. In front of Bianca. That had been deliberate. Naomi had wanted him humiliated. She'd wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain he'd caused her. Julian had called her immediately, furious. "What the hell is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," Naomi had said calmly. "I want a divorce." "You can't just, we need to talk about this." "No, we don't. My lawyer will be in touch." "Naomi, be reasonable. We can work this out. I'll end things with Bianca. We can go to counseling." So he'd admitted it. Just like that. No denial. No apology. Just a simple acknowledgement that he'd been cheating, followed by an assumption that she'd take him back. "I don't want to work it out," Naomi had said. "I want a divorce. And Julian? You should probably have your lawyer look at those papers carefully. Especially the part about the asset division." She'd hung up before he could respond. That had been 3 months ago. 3 months of legal battles, of Julian trying to intimidate her, of Bianca thinking she'd won the prize. 3 months of Naomi standing firm, refusing to settle for less than she deserved. And now, tonight, watching them celebrate, Naomi knew it had all been worth it. The morning after Naomi had served Julian with divorce papers, he tried to come home. She changed the locks. He'd stood outside their penthouse apartment, banging on the door, demanding to be let in. "This is my home," he'd shouted through the door. "Actually," Naomi had called back calmly, "according to the restraining order that was filed this morning, you're not allowed within 500 feet of this property. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." She'd heard him swear, heard his footsteps retreating. Through the peephole, she'd watched him punch the elevator button repeatedly, his face red with rage. Good. Let him be angry. Let him feel out of control. That's how she'd felt for the past year, every time she'd discovered another lie, another betrayal. Julian's lawyer had called Patricia within hours. "My client is willing to offer Mrs. Harris a generous settlement. $5 million and the house in the Hamptons." Patricia had laughed. Actually laughed. "Tell your client that Mrs. Harris is not interested in his charity. We'll see him in court." The legal battle that followed had been brutal. Julian had tried every tactic he could think of. He'd claimed Naomi was mentally unstable. He'd accused her of having affairs of her own. He'd even tried to argue that she'd been a bad wife and that's why he'd strayed. But Patricia had been ready for all of it. For every accusation Julian made, they had evidence to disprove it. Medical records showing Naomi was perfectly healthy. Phone records showing she'd never even texted another man inappropriately. Character witnesses who testified about her dedication to the marriage. And then they'd started revealing what they had on Julian. The first bombshell had been the affair. Patricia had presented text messages, photos, credit card statements showing hotel rooms and gifts. The judge had not been impressed. The second bombshell had been the hidden assets. The forensic accountants had testified about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the properties purchased under false names. Julian's face had gone pale as each revelation came to light. The third and biggest bombshell had been the loan documents from Naomi's father. Patricia had presented the original papers, showing that Julian's entire empire had been built on borrowed money that he'd never repaid. "Your Honor," Patricia had argued, "my client's family gave Mr. Harris the foundation for everything he has today. That loan, with interest over 10 years, is worth approximately $30 million. But that's not all. Without that initial investment, Mr. Harris would never have been able to leverage the deals that followed. My client is entitled to a significant portion of the marital assets, not as a settlement, but as repayment for her family's investment and her own contributions to building this empire." Julian's lawyer had tried to fight it. "The loan documents are old. There's no proof." "We have bank records showing the transfer," Patricia had interrupted. "We have Mr. Harrison's personal notes about the loan. We have emails between him and Mr. Harris discussing repayment. The evidence is irrefutable." The judge had taken a recess to review everything. When he'd returned, his expression had been stern. "Mr. Harris, I've reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. I find Mrs. Harris's claims to be credible and well documented. I also find your attempts to hide assets deeply troubling. This court will not reward that behavior." Julian had tried to interrupt, but the judge had held up his hand. "I'm not finished. Based on the evidence, I'm ruling that Mrs. Harris is entitled to 60% of all marital assets, including businesses, properties, and investments. This includes assets that Mr. Harris attempted to hide. If full disclosure is not made within 30 days, I will hold Mr. Harris in contempt." Naomi had sat perfectly still, showing no emotion. But inside, she'd been celebrating. Julian had looked like he'd been punched. His lawyer had whispered urgently in his ear, but Julian had just shaken his head, looking defeated. After the hearing, Julian had tried to approach Naomi in the hallway. "Please, can we just talk?" Naomi had looked at him coldly. "We have nothing to discuss. Anything you need to say goes through my lawyer. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. And now you're paying for it." She'd walked away, leaving him standing there. Over the following weeks, the details of the settlement had been worked out. Naomi had gotten the penthouse. She'd gotten controlling interest in 3 of Julian's companies. She'd gotten half of the investment portfolio. She'd gotten the vacation home in Aspen. She'd gotten one of the cars. But more than the physical assets, she'd gotten something more valuable: freedom. Freedom from a man who'd never truly valued her. Freedom to build her own life. Freedom to discover who she was without him. During this time, Naomi had also been watching what was happening with Bianca. The tracking software she'd installed on Julian's phone was still active, and what she'd seen had been enlightening. At first, Bianca had been supportive. "We'll get through this together," she texted Julian. Once the divorce is over, we can finally be together properly. But as the scope of Naomi's settlement had become clear, Bianca's tune had changed. How much is she getting? Bianca had texted. Too much, Julian had responded. Way too much. But you'll still be rich, right? There had been a long pause before Julian had replied. I'll be okay. Just not as comfortable as before. Another pause. Then, what does that mean exactly? It means we might need to scale back a bit. The penthouse is gone. Some of the businesses. I'll have to restructure everything. Oh. That single word had said everything. Bianca hadn't signed up for a scaled-back lifestyle. She'd wanted the billionaire, not the millionaire. She'd wanted the penthouse and the private jets and the expensive vacations. Naomi had watched their relationship deteriorate in real time through those text messages. Bianca had started making excuses not to see Julian. She'd stopped responding to his calls as quickly. She'd started mentioning other men she'd met. Julian had tried to hold on. I love you, he texted desperately. We can still have a good life together. I need time to think, Bianca had replied. This is all moving too fast. Naomi had almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then she'd remembered every lie, every night he'd spent with Bianca while Naomi had waited at home, every time he'd made her feel small and unimportant. No, she didn't feel sorry for him at all. The day the divorce had been finalized, Patricia had called Naomi. It's done. You're officially free. And rich. Naomi had been standing in her new apartment, looking out at the city. Thank you, Patricia. For everything. Thank you for trusting me. And Naomi? What you did, the way you handled this, I've never seen anything like it. Most women in your position fall apart. You turned into a warrior. After hanging up, Naomi had opened a bottle of champagne. Not the expensive stuff Julian always bought. Just a nice bottle she'd picked up at the store. She'd poured herself a glass and toasted to her reflection in the window. Here's to new beginnings, she'd said to herself. Here's to never settling for less than I deserve again. Her phone had rung. Julian. She'd let it go to voicemail. He'd called 3 more times. Each time she'd ignored it. Finally, he'd left a message. Naomi, please. I know I messed up. But you can't just take everything. This isn't fair. I built those companies. I worked hard for what I have. Your lawyer tricked the judge. If you'd just listened to me. She deleted the message before he could finish. Julian didn't get it. He still thought he was the victim. He still thought she'd somehow cheated to get what was rightfully hers. He still didn't understand that actions have consequences. That evening, Naomi had met Simone for dinner. Simone had been her best friend since college, one of the few people who'd known what Naomi was planning during those 6 months of preparation. You did it, Simone had said, raising her glass. You actually did it. I did. Naomi had clinked her glass against Simone's. I really did. How does it feel? Naomi had thought about it. Scary. Exciting. Freeing. All at once. Are you worried about running the companies? Honestly? No. I've been studying them for months. I understand them better than Julian ever did. He was always about the flash, the big deals, the headlines. He never paid attention to the details. That's where I'll be different. What's your first move? I'm meeting with the executive teams next week. I want to understand their concerns, their ideas. I want to build something sustainable, not just profitable. Simone had smiled. You're going to be amazing at this. You know that, right? Naomi had hoped so. She'd spent 12 years believing Julian when he'd said she didn't understand business, that she should leave the important decisions to him. Now she had the chance to prove him wrong. And herself right. Over the next few days, Naomi had prepared for her new role. She'd read through years of financial reports. She'd studied market trends. She'd researched competitors. She'd made lists of questions to ask the executives. She'd also bought a new wardrobe. Not because she needed to impress anyone, but because she wanted to feel powerful. She'd chosen sharp suits in bold colors, expensive heels, statement jewelry. When she looked in the mirror, she'd seen a CEO looking back. The night before her first day officially taking control of the companies, Naomi had stood in her apartment, looking at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Julian was probably with Bianca, celebrating what he thought was a victory. He had no idea what was coming. Naomi had smiled. Let him celebrate. Let him think he'd gotten away with only losing 60%. He didn't know yet that she was about to make that 60% worth twice what his 40% was worth. Because that's what she'd realized during those months of studying his businesses. Julian had been coasting. He'd been making safe, boring decisions. He'd been protecting what he had instead of growing it. Naomi wasn't going to make that mistake. She was going to take risks, make bold moves, transform these companies into something even bigger. And Julian would have to watch it all happen, knowing that the empire he'd lost was worth more in her hands than it had ever been in his. That was the real revenge. Not just taking what was his but making it better. Proving that she'd been the valuable one all along. Naomi had gone to bed that night with a smile on her face, excited for Monday morning in a way she hadn't felt excited in years. Her new life was about to begin. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Naomi woke at 5 a.m., earlier than necessary, but she couldn't sleep. Today was the day everything changed. Today she walked into Julian's office as the owner. Today she took control. She'd spent extra time getting ready. Her suit was navy blue, perfectly tailored to her frame. Her hair was styled in a professional updo. Her makeup was flawless but not overdone. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw confidence staring back. The first stop was Harris Industries, the largest of the 3 companies she now controlled. It was a real estate development firm that Julian had built into a powerhouse. The office was in a gleaming tower downtown, taking up 3 entire floors. Patricia had arranged for Naomi to arrive before the regular staff. At 7 a.m., Naomi walked through the glass doors with her lawyer and a security team. The security guards at the front desk looked confused. "I'm Naomi Harris," she'd said calmly. "The new majority owner. These men are here to change the locks on the executive offices. Here's the court order." The guards had looked at the paperwork, then at each other, then back at Naomi. "Ma'am, we're going to need to call Mr. Harris." "Mr. Julian Harris no longer has authority in this building," Patricia had interrupted. "As you can see from the court documents, Mrs. Naomi Harris now owns 60% of this company and has full operational control. If you interfere, you'll be in violation of a court order." The guards had stepped aside. Naomi and her team had taken the elevator to the executive floor. Julian's office, her office now, was at the end of a long hallway. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Modern art on the walls. A desk the size of a small car. She'd walked in and sat down in the leather chair. It had felt right. While the security team had changed the locks, Naomi had gone through the desk drawers. Most were full of standard office supplies, but in the bottom drawer she'd found something interesting, a file labeled personal. Inside had been letters from Bianca. Love letters written by hand professing her devotion. There had also been photos of them together on trips. And something else, a prenuptial agreement draft between Julian and Bianca, dated just 2 months ago. Naomi had read through it, her eyebrows rising. Julian had been planning to marry Bianca the moment the divorce was final. The prenup had been extremely one-sided, protecting all of Julian's assets. Bianca would get nothing if they divorced. So Julian had trusted Bianca enough to destroy his marriage but not enough to share his wealth. Interesting. Naomi had taken photos of everything and sent them to Patricia with a note. Might be useful later. At 8 a.m., employees had started arriving. Naomi had asked the executive assistant, a young woman named Tasha, to gather all department heads for a meeting at 9. "Mr. Harris usually does those meetings on Fridays," Tasha had started. "I'm not Mr. Harris," Naomi had said with a smile. 9 a.m. please. Conference room. At 9 sharp, Naomi had walked into the conference room. 12 executives sat around the table, all men, all looking confused and irritated. "Who are you?" one of them had demanded. "Where's Julian?" Naomi had remained standing at the head of the table. "My name is Naomi Harris. As of this morning, I own 60% of this company and have full operational control. Julian no longer makes decisions here. I do." Silence. Then everyone had started talking at once. "This is ridiculous. Julian built this company. You can't just." Naomi had waited for them to quiet down. When they didn't, she'd slammed her hand on the table. The sharp crack had silenced them immediately. "I can and I did. Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is you accept the change and we move forward. The hard way is you resist and I replace you. I have resumes from dozens of qualified candidates ready to take your positions. Your choice." One executive, an older man with gray hair, had leaned back in his chair. "And what makes you think you can run this company? What do you know about real estate development?" "More than you might think. I've spent the past 6 months studying every deal this company has made in the past 5 years. I've identified at least 15 projects that are underperforming due to poor management and lack of oversight. I've also identified 3 major opportunities that Julian refused to pursue because they seemed too risky." She'd pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. This is a proposal for a development project in the warehouse district. Julian rejected it last year. But the market has shifted. Property values in that area have increased by 40%. If we move fast, we can acquire the land and start development within 6 months. Projected profit, $20 million in year 1, scaling to $50 million by year 3. The executives had looked at the proposal, passing it around. Naomi had watched their faces change from skepticism to interest. This is actually pretty good, one of them had admitted. I have 4 more proposals like this, Naomi had said. This company has been playing it safe for too long. We're going to start taking smart risks. We're going to grow, not just maintain. Another executive, a woman who'd been quiet until now, had spoken up. I'm Christine, head of acquisitions. I actually proposed that warehouse district project last year. Julian shut it down without even reading my full report. Naomi had looked at her with interest. Tell me more. Over the next hour, the meeting had transformed. The executives, once they'd realized Naomi was serious and knowledgeable, had started opening up. They'd shared frustrations about Julian's leadership. They'd talked about projects they'd wanted to pursue but couldn't. They'd discussed problems that had been ignored. Naomi had listened carefully, taking notes. By the end of the meeting, she'd had a clear picture of the company's problems and potential. Here's what we're going to do, she'd said. Christine, I want you to restart the warehouse district project. Get me a detailed timeline and budget by Friday. The rest of you, I want reports on your departments. Not the sanitized versions you gave Julian. I want the truth. What's working, what's not, what needs to change. I'm not interested in protecting egos. I'm interested in results. As the executives had filed out, several had stopped to shake her hand. Welcome, Christine had said. I think this company is going to be better with you in charge. Naomi had smiled. I know it will be. The rest of the day had been a whirlwind. Naomi had met with HR, finance, and legal departments. She'd reviewed contracts and budgets. She'd made decisions that needed making, things Julian had been putting off. At noon, her phone had rung. Julian. She'd answered this time. What the hell do you think you're doing? He'd shouted. Running my companies. Is there a problem? Those are not your companies. I built them. With my father's money. And now they're mine. Get used to it. Naomi, you're going to destroy everything I've worked for. You don't know what you're doing. Actually, I've already found 12 ways you've been hemorrhaging money due to poor management. By the end of the week, I'll have fixed at least half of them. You're welcome. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to appeal the court decision. You won't get away with this. Julian, you signed the divorce papers. You agreed to the terms. The only reason you're upset now is because you didn't bother to read them carefully. That's not my problem. That's yours. She'd hung up before he could respond. That evening, Naomi had met with Patricia at a quiet restaurant. How did it go? Patricia had asked. Better than I expected. The executives were resistant at first, but once they saw I knew what I was talking about, most of them came around. And Julian? Called me screaming. Threatened to appeal. He has no grounds for appeal. He signed everything willingly. His lawyer should have done a better job reviewing the documents. Patricia had smiled. But that's not our problem. No, it's not. Patricia had raised her glass. To the beginning of your empire. Naomi had clinked her glass against Patricia's. To revenge served smart. Over the next few days, Naomi had visited the other 2 companies she now controlled. Harris Tech Solutions, a software development firm. And Harris Consulting, a business advisory company. The receptions had been similar. Initial resistance followed by cautious acceptance once she demonstrated her knowledge and capability. She'd also made some bold moves. At Harris Tech, she'd promoted a young programmer who'd been overlooked by Julian to head of development. The woman had brilliant ideas that Julian had ignored. At Harris Consulting, she'd brought in a diversity consultant to help recruit more women and people of color. Julian had kept the company overwhelmingly white and male. The changes hadn't been just about revenge. They'd been about making the companies better. But the fact that each change had undone something Julian had done wrong? That had been satisfying too. By Friday, Naomi had been exhausted but exhilarated. She'd spent 5 days proving to herself and everyone else that she belonged in this role. That she could do this. She'd been in her office reviewing reports when Tasha had knocked on the door. Mrs. Harris? There's someone here to see you. She says it's important. Who? Bianca Montgomery. Naomi had felt her stomach tighten. She'd known this confrontation was coming eventually. Send her in. Bianca had walked in wearing a tight dress and heels, her blonde hair perfect, her makeup dramatic. She'd looked around the office with obvious envy before focusing on Naomi. "Nice office," Bianca had said. "Looks different from when Julian had it." "What do you want, Bianca?" "I want to talk." Woman to woman. Naomi had gestured to a chair. "Sit." Bianca had sat, crossing her legs. "Look, I know you hate me. I don't blame you. But I need you to understand something. I didn't set out to steal your husband. It just happened. Things don't just happen. You made choices. Julian made choices. Now you both have to live with the consequences. The consequences are that Julian is broke and miserable. Broke is a stretch. He still has 40% of a considerable fortune. It's not the same. He's used to a certain lifestyle. Then he should have thought of that before he cheated on his wife." Naomi had leaned forward. "Why are you really here, Bianca?" Bianca had hesitated. Then, "I need a job. Julian says I have to quit at Harris Tech because it's too awkward now. But I need to work. I have rent to pay." Naomi had almost laughed. The audacity. "You want me to give you a job?" "Not you specifically. But you control 3 companies. There must be a position somewhere. Let me get this straight. You slept with my husband for a year. You helped destroy my marriage. And now you want me to employ you? I'm good at what I do. My personal life shouldn't affect my professional opportunities." Naomi had stood up. "Get out of my office. Mrs. Harris. Get out. Now. And consider this your official termination from Harris Tech Solutions, effective immediately. You'll receive a severance package as required by law. But I never want to see you in any of my buildings again." Bianca's face had flushed red. "You can't do this. This is discrimination." "It's not discrimination. You created a hostile work environment by having an affair with the CEO. That's grounds for termination. If you want to fight it, get a lawyer. But I promise you, you won't win." Bianca had stood up, her hands shaking. "You're a real witch, you know that? I've been called worse. Usually by people who underestimated me." Naomi had walked to the door and opened it. "Goodbye, Bianca. I hope you find what you're looking for. Just find it somewhere else." After Bianca had left, Naomi had sat back down at her desk, her heart racing. The confrontation had been unpleasant but necessary. She'd needed to make it clear that she wasn't going to be kind or forgiving to either of the people who'd betrayed her. That evening, as Naomi had been packing up to leave, her phone had rung. An unknown number. She'd answered cautiously. "Mrs. Harris? This is Detective Rodriguez with the Financial Crimes Unit. I'd like to ask you some questions about your ex-husband, Julian Harris." Naomi had felt a chill run down her spine. "What about him?" "We've received information about possible tax fraud and money laundering. We understand you recently went through a divorce and may have information relevant to our investigation." Naomi had thought about all the documents she'd found. The offshore accounts. The shell companies. The hidden assets. "I might have some information," she'd said carefully. "But I'd like my lawyer present when we speak." "Of course. How about Monday morning?" "Monday works." After she'd hung up, Naomi had called Patricia. "The police want to talk about Julian's finances." There had been a pause. "Did you report him?" "No. But I wonder if someone else did." "Who?" Naomi had thought about it. Probably one of his business partners. Or maybe someone at the IRS finally noticed the discrepancies. "Are you going to cooperate with the investigation?" Naomi had looked out at the city lights, thinking about Julian and Bianca celebrating while thinking they'd won. Thinking about all the ways Julian had cheated, not just on her but on the system. "Yes," she'd said. "I'm going to tell them everything I know." Because that was the thing about revenge. It wasn't just about taking what was yours. It was about making sure justice was served completely. And Naomi was just getting started. Monday morning, Naomi sat in a stark conference room at the downtown police station with Patricia beside her. Across the table were Detective Rodriguez and an IRS agent named Mr. Chin. Between them was a recorder. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Harris," Detective Rodriguez said. He was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a weathered face. "We appreciate your cooperation." "Before we begin," Patricia said, "I want to clarify that my client is here voluntarily. She has not been accused of any wrongdoing and is simply providing information about her ex-husband's financial activities." "Understood," Mr. Chin said. He was younger, maybe 40, with sharp features and an intense gaze. "Mrs. Harris, how much did you know about your husband's business dealings during your marriage?" Naomi had prepared for this question. "Not much at first. Julian kept me separated from his work. He said I didn't need to worry about it. When did that change? About 6 months ago when I discovered he was having an affair. I started investigating, trying to understand our financial situation before filing for divorce. That's when I found discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? Naomi pulled out a folder she'd prepared. Inside were copies of documents she'd found, bank statements, company filings, transaction records. She'd kept the originals in a safe deposit box, but these copies would be enough for the investigation to start. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Naomi said, sliding papers across the table. Shell companies in Delaware that don't seem to do any actual business. Properties purchased under false names. Money moving between accounts in ways that don't make sense for legitimate business purposes. Detective Rodriguez and Mr. Chen looked through the papers, their expressions growing more serious with each page. How did you access these documents? Mr. Chen asked. Most of them were in Julian's home office. Some I found on his computer. He wasn't very careful about security. I think he assumed I would never think to look. Did you make copies of computer files? Yes. I have them on a secure drive. Naomi pulled a USB drive from her purse. Everything is here. Emails, spreadsheets, transaction records going back 5 years. Mr. Chin took the drive carefully like it was precious. This is extremely helpful. Can you walk us through what you think was happening? Naomi explained what she'd pieced together over months of investigation. How Julian had been moving money offshore to avoid taxes. How he'd been using shell companies to hide income. How some of his real estate deals had involved what looked like money laundering, accepting cash from questionable sources and filtering it through legitimate businesses. Did you ever meet any of these questionable sources? Detective Rodriguez asked. Once or twice. Julian brought some men to our house for dinner about 2 years ago. He said they were investors from overseas. But something felt wrong about them. They were too smooth, too careful with their words. After they left, I asked Julian about them, but he brushed me off. Do you remember their names? Victor something. Russian, I think. And another man older who Julian called Mr. Zhou. I didn't get a last name. The detective and agent exchanged glances. Clearly these names meant something to them. Mrs. Harris, Mr. Chin said carefully, are you aware that cooperating with this investigation could have consequences for you? If these activities occurred during your marriage, you could potentially be implicated. Patricia spoke up immediately. My client had no knowledge of these activities at the time they occurred. She only discovered them after the fact while preparing for divorce. She is here as a witness, not a suspect. I understand. I just want to make sure Mrs. Harris knows what she's getting into. Naomi looked him straight in the eye. I understand perfectly. Julian committed crimes. I'm not going to protect him just because we were married. He didn't protect me. The interview lasted 3 hours. Naomi answered every question honestly, providing context and details about Julian's business operations. By the end, both investigators looked satisfied. This is excellent work, Mrs. Harris, Detective Rodriguez said. Most people wouldn't have been thorough enough to gather this kind of evidence. I had a good teacher, Naomi said, glancing at Patricia. And I had motivation. After they left the station, Patricia drove Naomi back to her office. You did great in there. But you know this is going to get ugly, right? Once Julian finds out you talked to the police, he's going to be furious. Let him be furious. He should have thought about consequences before he committed fraud. I'm serious, Naomi. He might try to retaliate. How? I have restraining orders. I have security. I have lawyers. What's he going to do? Patricia didn't answer, which worried Naomi more than any warning could have. That night, Naomi was in her apartment when her phone rang. An unknown number. She answered cautiously. You told the police about me? Julian's voice was shaking with rage. You actually went to the police? How did you get this number? Don't change the subject. Do you have any idea what you've done? I gave the police information about financial crimes. What you do with that information is up to them. This is going to destroy me. I could go to prison. Then you shouldn't have broken the law. I can't believe you do this. After everything we had together. After 12 years of marriage. Naomi felt her own anger rising. After everything we had together? You mean after you spent a year cheating on me? After you lied to my face every single day? After you took my father's money and built an empire, then told me I was just decoration? I never said that. Yes, you did. Multiple times. You made me feel small and useless. You made me think I had no value beyond being your wife. Well, guess what? I have plenty of value. And I'm done letting you make me forget that. Naomi, please. If you tell them I'll cooperate, maybe they'll go easy on me. You could help me. Help you? Like you helped me when you were sleeping with Bianca? Like you helped me when you were hiding assets during our divorce? That was different. No, it wasn't. You made your choices. Now live with them. I'm begging you. Naomi hung up. Her hands were shaking. Part of her felt guilty. They'd spent 12 years together. There had been good times before everything fell apart. But then she remembered the text message that had started this all. Last night was incredible. She remembered tracking Julian to hotels. She remembered finding receipts for jewelry she'd never received. She remembered the way he'd dismissed her in meetings, talked over her at dinner parties, made her feel invisible. No, she didn't feel guilty. She felt free. The next day at work, Naomi threw herself into running her companies. She approved the warehouse district development project, allocating $15 million to get it started. She hired a new CFO for Harris Tech Solutions, someone with a reputation for innovation. She met with investors who wanted to partner on new ventures. She was in a meeting when Tasha knocked on the conference room door. Mrs. Harris? Sorry to interrupt. There are FBI agents here to see you. Naomi excused herself and went to the lobby. 2 agents in dark suits stood there holding badges. Mrs. Harris? We're following up on the information you provided to Detective Rodriguez. We have some additional questions. Naomi led them to a private office and answered their questions for the next hour. They wanted more details about the men Julian had met with, about transactions she'd seen, about conversations she'd overheard. When they left, Naomi realized this investigation was bigger than she'd thought. This wasn't just about tax fraud. This was about organized crime. That evening, she met Simone for dinner at a restaurant near her apartment. You look tired, Simone said as soon as she saw Naomi. It's been a week. The FBI is now investigating Julian. Apparently, he wasn't just cheating on his taxes. He might have been involved with some dangerous people. Simone's eyes widened. Are you safe? I think so. I have security. And I don't think anyone knows I'm the one who provided the information. Still, be careful. Naomi nodded. She'd been so focused on revenge that she hadn't really considered the danger. But now, sitting with her best friend, she felt a flutter of fear. Maybe I went too far, she said quietly. No. Simone reached across the table and took Naomi's hand. Julian went too far. You're just making sure he faces consequences. There's a difference. Is there? Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing this for justice or just because I want him to hurt the way I hurt. Can't it be both? Naomi smiled despite herself. I guess it can. They ate dinner and talked about other things. Simone's job at the museum, her new boyfriend, plans for the holidays. Normal things that made Naomi remember there was a life beyond revenge. When Naomi got home that night, there was an envelope that had been slipped under her door. No address, no stamp. Just her name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message: drop the investigation or face consequences. Naomi felt her blood run cold. She immediately called Patricia. I'm calling the police, Patricia said after Naomi read her the message. This is a threat. Or a bluff. Either way, we take it seriously. Do you have security cameras in your building? Yes. Good. The police can check the footage. In the meantime, I'm arranging for a security detail. No arguments. Naomi didn't argue. Suddenly, her quest for revenge felt very real and very dangerous. The police came and took the note as evidence. They reviewed security footage but couldn't identify who delivered it. The person had worn a hat and kept their face down, avoiding cameras. Detective Rodriguez pulled Naomi aside. Mrs. Harris, I need to be straight with you. The people your ex-husband was involved with are serious criminals. If they think you're a threat, they might act on it. What should I do? Be careful. Vary your routine. Don't go anywhere alone. And consider staying somewhere else for a while, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. Naomi didn't want to hide. But she also didn't want to be stupid. She agreed to move into a hotel for a few days while the investigation continued. That night, lying in an unfamiliar hotel bed, Naomi wondered if revenge was worth this. Worth the fear, the danger, the constant looking over her shoulder. Then she thought about Julian, probably sleeping peacefully, thinking he could threaten his way out of consequences. Thinking he could scare her into silence. No, she wasn't going to be scared into silence. She'd been silent for 12 years, living in Julian's shadow. She was done being silent. Whatever came next, she would face it. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she refused to let fear control her life anymore. Naomi fell asleep with her phone beside her pillow, security on speed dial, ready for whatever morning would bring. Naomi had been staying at the hotel for 3 days when Patricia called with news. "You need to see this." Patricia arrived an hour later with her tablet, looking grim. "It's all over the news." She pulled up a video. It was Bianca sitting on a talk show couch, wearing a demure dress that was completely different from her usual style. The banner at the bottom read, "Billionaire's Mistress tells all." Naomi's stomach dropped as she pressed play. "I'm here today to share my story," Bianca was saying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "About how I was manipulated and used by Julian Harris." The host, a woman with perfectly styled hair, leaned forward sympathetically. "Tell us what happened." "I was young and naive when I started working at his company. He was my boss, this powerful, wealthy man. He pursued me relentlessly. I kept saying no, but he was so persistent. He told me he was unhappy in his marriage, that his wife didn't understand him." Naomi felt rage building in her chest. This was a complete lie. "Did you know he was married?" the host asked. "Of course. But he said they were separated, that divorce was imminent. He said she was only with him for his money." Bianca wiped another tear. "I believed him. I trusted him. And then when his wife found out, she blamed me for everything." His ex-wife, Naomi Harris, recently took control of most of his companies through their divorce settlement. "Some people are saying she used you as an excuse to take his fortune." "That's exactly what happened." Bianca looked directly at the camera. "Naomi Harris is a manipulative, vindictive woman who saw an opportunity to steal her husband's hard-earned wealth. She didn't care that I was just a victim in all this. She fired me. She destroyed my reputation. She took everything from Julian and left him with nothing." The host nodded sympathetically. "That must have been very difficult for you." "It still is. I can't find work anywhere. My name has been dragged through the mud. All because I fell in love with the wrong man." Naomi paused the video. Her hands were shaking. "This is unbelievable." "It gets worse," Patricia said. "She's filed a lawsuit against you for wrongful termination and defamation. She's asking for $5 million in damages." "On what grounds?" "She claims you fired her in retaliation for the affair, which she says was Julian's doing, not hers. She's painting herself as a victim of sexual harassment who then became a victim of your revenge." Naomi paced the hotel room trying to process this. "We have text messages proving she pursued the relationship. We have evidence that she knew exactly what she was doing." "I know. And we'll present all of that in court. But in the meantime, she's doing damage to your reputation. Look at this." Patricia showed Naomi social media. The video had gone viral. Thousands of comments, most of them attacking Naomi. Rich women always blame the other woman instead of their cheating husbands. She stole his money and now she's playing victim. Bianca is brave for speaking out. "They don't know the truth," Naomi said. "No, they don't. But that's not stopping them from having opinions." Naomi's phone rang. "Tasha. Mrs. Harris, I'm so sorry to bother you, but reporters are outside the building. They want a statement about the interview. Tell them no comment. They're not leaving. Some of them are harassing employees as they arrive." Patricia heard this and said, "I'll handle it." "Naomi, don't talk to anyone. Let me make a statement on your behalf." After Patricia left, Naomi sat on the hotel bed feeling overwhelmed. She'd expected Julian to fight back. She'd expected legal battles and financial disputes. But she hadn't expected Bianca to completely rewrite history and position herself as a victim. Her phone buzzed with a text from Simone. "Just saw the interview. Don't believe anything she said. Everyone who knows you knows the truth." But that was the problem. Most people didn't know Naomi. They only knew the story Bianca was telling. Over the next few days, the situation got worse. More interviews surfaced with Bianca crying and claiming Julian had pressured her into the relationship. A women's advocacy group even released a statement supporting her, saying she represented all women who'd been taken advantage of by powerful men. Naomi wanted to scream. Bianca hadn't been taken advantage of. She'd actively pursued a married man. She'd sent him explicit text messages. She'd planned romantic getaways. She'd talked about becoming the next Mrs. Harris. But Naomi couldn't say any of that publicly without looking petty and vindictive. Patricia advised patience. "Let her tell her story. Then we'll present the evidence in court. The truth will come out." "When? How long do I have to be the villain while she plays the victim?" "As long as it takes. I know it's frustrating, but trust the process." The process felt like torture. Every day brought new articles, new interviews, new comments attacking Naomi. Her company's stock prices dropped as investors worried about the bad publicity. Some clients pulled their contracts, not wanting to be associated with the controversy. Naomi threw herself into work, trying to ignore the noise. She focused on the warehouse district project, which was progressing ahead of schedule. She approved funding for a new tech initiative at Harris Tech Solutions. She met with the executives, who assured her they supported her despite the media storm. But it was hard. Everywhere she went, she felt people staring, judging, whispering. A week after Bianca's first interview, Julian called. Naomi almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of her. "I saw Bianca's interviews," he said. "No greeting, no preamble. And? I want you to know I had nothing to do with that. She's lying about a lot of things." Naomi was surprised. "You're admitting she lied?" "I never pressured her into anything. I never told her we were separated. She knew exactly what she was doing." "Then why aren't you saying that publicly?" Julian was quiet for a moment. "Because I'm trying to get the FBI off my back. If I contradict her story now, it'll look like we're coordinating. Plus, her story makes me look like less of a villain. People feel sorry for the guy who was manipulated by his mistress and destroyed by his vindictive ex-wife. So you're letting her lie to save yourself." "I'm trying to survive, Naomi. You took everything from me. My companies, my money, my reputation. And now the FBI is investigating me for for things that happened years ago." "Crimes you committed," Naomi corrected. "Don't act like you're innocent." "I made mistakes. I know that. But did I really deserve to lose everything? Did I deserve to be cheated on for a year? Did I deserve to be told I was just decoration?" Silence. "I'm sorry," Julian finally said. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. I never meant to hurt you that badly. But you did hurt me. And now you're letting Bianca hurt me more by lying about what happened. What do you want me to do? Tell the truth." "I can't." "Then we have nothing to talk about." Naomi hung up, feeling even more frustrated. Julian was sorry, but not sorry enough to do the right thing. He was willing to let Bianca destroy Naomi's reputation if it helped him. That night, Naomi met with Patricia and a PR consultant named Rachel. Rachel was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in crisis management. "Here's the situation," Rachel said, pulling up slides on her laptop. "Bianca has successfully positioned herself as a sympathetic figure. Young woman taken advantage of by a powerful man, then victimized by his angry wife. It's a story people want to believe. Because it fits their narrative about rich women being vindictive," Naomi said bitterly. "Exactly. But we can counter that narrative. We just have to be strategic." "How?" Rachel smiled. "We don't defend. We redirect. Instead of arguing about the affair, we talk about what you're doing now. Your business success. Your foundation helping other women. Your plans for the future. We make you so interesting that the affair becomes old news. Will that work?" "It's working for other clients. People have short attention spans. Give them a better story and they'll forget about the old one." Over the next 2 weeks, Naomi followed Rachel's advice. She gave an interview to a business magazine about her plans for the companies. She attended a charity gala and was photographed with several prominent philanthropists. She announced a new scholarship program for women in business, funded by her personal fortune. Slowly the narrative began to shift. Articles appeared praising her business savvy. Comments on social media started defending her. A few feminist writers even published pieces about how Naomi had turned betrayal into empowerment. But the best moment came when one of Bianca's friends, probably hoping for attention, posted old text messages online. Messages where Bianca had bragged about dating a billionaire. Messages where she talked about expensive gifts Julian bought her. Messages where she'd laughed about the wife being clueless. The messages went viral. Suddenly, Bianca's victim story looked much less credible. Bianca tried to claim the messages were fake, but more people came forward with similar stories. Co-workers who'd heard her brag about the affair. Friends who'd warned her she was making a mistake. Even her own mother, in an interview, admitted Bianca had known Julian was married. The tide turned completely when security footage from a restaurant surfaced showing Bianca kissing Julian first, initiating the relationship. The footage was from over a year ago, proving the affair had been going on longer than Bianca had claimed. Patricia called Naomi with the news. Bianca's lawyers are withdrawing her lawsuit. They know they can't win. Naomi felt relief wash over her. What about her talk show interviews? The shows are issuing corrections and apologies. Turns out, Bianca had signed a document promising her story was true. Since it wasn't, they're liable for spreading false information. And Bianca? She's disappeared from social media. Rumor is she left the city. Naomi should have felt victorious. But mostly she just felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of defending herself, tired of dealing with people who'd betrayed her. That evening she sat in her apartment looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from friends and colleagues. The business media was praising her for handling the scandal with grace. Stock prices for her companies had rebounded. She'd won this round. But it hadn't felt the way she'd expected. There was no satisfaction in watching Bianca's reputation crumble, even though Bianca had tried to destroy hers. Naomi realized something important. Revenge wasn't actually about destroying other people. It was about refusing to be destroyed yourself. It was about standing up, fighting back, and proving you were stronger than anyone thought. Bianca had tried to paint herself as a victim and Naomi as a villain. But the truth had come out, as it always did eventually. And the truth was that Naomi had been wronged but had refused to stay down. She'd taken her power back. That was the real victory. 3 months after the Bianca scandal died down, Naomi stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows in her office, looking out at the construction site below. The warehouse district project was taking shape. Steel beams rose into the sky, forming the skeleton of what would become a mixed-use development: apartments, retail space, and office buildings. The contractors say we're ahead of schedule, Christine, the head of acquisitions, said behind her. At this rate, we'll have the first building ready for occupancy by next spring. Naomi smiled. That's excellent news. What about the retail spaces? We have commitments from 3 major tenants already. A grocery store, a gym, and a restaurant group. They're excited about being part of a revitalized neighborhood. This was what Naomi loved about her new life. Real progress. Tangible results. Under Julian's leadership, the company had been stagnant, playing it safe, avoiding risk. In just 6 months under Naomi's control, they'd launched 4 major projects and expanded into 2 new markets. Her phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. Court hearing this afternoon. Don't forget. Naomi had almost forgotten. Today was the hearing for Julian's criminal case. The FBI investigation had uncovered everything Naomi had suspected and more. Money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. Julian was facing serious charges. Part of Naomi felt guilty about that. But a larger part remembered that Julian had made his own choices. She hadn't forced him to break the law. She'd just stopped protecting him from the consequences. I have to go, Naomi told Christine. Keep me updated on the project. At the courthouse, Patricia was waiting in the hallway. You don't have to be here, she said. You're not required to attend. I know. But I want to. Inside the courtroom, Naomi sat in the back row. Julian sat at the defendant's table with his lawyer. He looked different, thinner, older, worn down. His suit was nice but not as expensive as what he used to wear. His hair had more gray in it. When he turned and saw Naomi, his face hardened. But he didn't say anything. The hearing proceeded quickly. The prosecutor laid out the charges, presenting evidence of offshore accounts and shell companies. Julian's lawyer tried to argue that his client had made mistakes but hadn't intended to break the law. The judge wasn't buying it. Mr. Harris, you're a sophisticated businessman. You knew exactly what you were doing. These weren't mistakes. They were deliberate attempts to evade taxes and launder money. Your Honor, Julian's lawyer said, my client is willing to cooperate fully. He's prepared to pay all back taxes and penalties. That's a start. But cooperation doesn't erase the crimes. The judge set a trial date for 6 months away and set bail at $2 million. Julian's face went pale. Naomi knew he probably didn't have that much liquid cash anymore. As everyone filed out of the courtroom, Julian approached Naomi in the hallway. Satisfied? He asked. I'm not here for satisfaction. I'm here as a witness to justice. Justice? You destroyed my life. No, Julian. You destroyed your own life. I just stopped covering for you. I loved you, Naomi. For 12 years, I loved you. You had a funny way of showing it. Cheating on me. Lying to me. Stealing from the government and putting both of us at risk. I made mistakes. Stop calling them mistakes. They were choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to commit fraud. You chose to put money ahead of integrity. And now you're facing consequences for those choices. Julian's lawyer touched his arm. We need to go. But Julian pulled away. I hope you're happy with what you've become. This cold, vengeful person. This isn't the woman I married. You're right. I'm not. The woman you married was naive and trusting. She believed the best in people. She put everyone else first. She let herself be diminished and dismissed. Naomi stepped closer. But you know what? I like this new version of myself better. She's strong. She's smart. She doesn't let anyone make her feel small. She's also alone. The words stung because they were partially true. Naomi was alone in many ways. But she was learning that alone was better than being with someone who didn't value her. I'd rather be alone than be with someone who treats me like I'm invisible, she said quietly. Goodbye, Julian. She walked away without looking back. Outside the courthouse, Patricia caught up with her. That was powerful. Was it? I don't feel powerful. I just feel sad. Sad for him? Sad for all of it. For 12 years that ended up meaning nothing. For the person I was who let herself be treated that way. For the person he became who thought cheating and lying were acceptable. You can be sad and strong at the same time, Patricia said. That's called being human. That evening, Naomi attended a business dinner. She'd been invited by a venture capital firm interested in investing in her next project. The dinner was at an upscale restaurant, and Naomi wore a deep blue dress that made her feel confident and powerful. As she entered the restaurant, she noticed people turning to look at her. Not with judgment or curiosity but with respect. She'd become someone in the business world. Someone people wanted to know, to work with, to invest in. The dinner went well. Naomi presented her vision for expanding into sustainable development. Buildings that were environmentally friendly and energy efficient. The investors were impressed. You have a clear vision, one of them said. That's rare. I spent a lot of years supporting someone else's vision, Naomi replied. Now I get to pursue my own. After dinner, as Naomi was leaving, a woman approached her. She was about 30, professionally dressed, with nervous energy. Mrs. Harris? I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Amanda. I just wanted to tell you that you've been such an inspiration to me. Thank you. That's kind of you to say. I mean it. I was in a relationship with a man who made me feel small. Who told me I wasn't smart enough to understand his work. When I heard your story, how you took back your power, it gave me the courage to leave him. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. I'm glad you got out. So am I. And now I'm starting my own business. I'm terrified, but I keep thinking about what you did. If you could rebuild your entire life, I can build mine too. After Amanda left, Naomi sat in her car for a moment, processing the encounter. She'd been so focused on her own journey that she hadn't realized she was becoming a symbol for other women. Women who'd been diminished and dismissed. Women who'd been made to feel like they weren't enough. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Amanda and about all the women who might be in situations like she'd been in. Women who loved men who didn't value them. Women who'd sacrificed their own dreams. Women who felt trapped. By morning, Naomi had made a decision. She called Patricia. I want to start a foundation. For women leaving bad marriages or relationships. I want to help them get back on their feet, legally, financially, emotionally. That's a wonderful idea. I want to fund it myself. No donors, no strings attached. Just help for women who need it. How much are you thinking? 10 million to start. More is needed. Patricia whistled. That's generous. I can afford it. And more importantly, I want to do it. If I can use my experience to help other women, then maybe everything I went through will mean something. The Harris Foundation for Women's Independence launched a month later. Naomi hired a staff of lawyers, financial advisors, and counselors. They offered free legal help for women going through divorce, financial planning for women starting over, and therapy for women recovering from difficult relationships. The response was overwhelming. Within days, they had hundreds of applications for help. Women from all walks of life, all with stories of being undervalued and dismissed. Naomi met with some of them personally. She heard their stories and saw herself in their experiences. And she helped them plan their own versions of taking their power back. One woman, Teresa, had been married to a doctor who controlled all their finances. He told me I didn't need to work, that he'd take care of everything. But then when I wanted to leave, I realized I had nothing. No savings in my name. No credit history. Nothing. The foundation helped Teresa establish her own credit, open her own accounts, and file for divorce. 6 months later, Teresa sent Naomi a photo of herself in front of her new apartment, beaming with pride. Another woman, Kelly, had been in a relationship with a man who constantly criticized her. He made me feel stupid. Like I couldn't do anything right. I started believing it. The foundation provided Kelly with therapy and career counseling. A year later, Kelly had a new job and a new sense of self-worth. These stories fueled Naomi. They reminded her why she'd fought so hard. Not just for herself, but for every woman who'd ever been made to feel less than she was. Meanwhile, her businesses continued to thrive. The Warehouse District project opened its first building to rave reviews. Harris Tech Solutions launched a new app that became a bestseller. Harris Consulting expanded into 3 new cities. Articles were written about Naomi's business acumen. She was invited to speak at conferences. Other companies wanted to partner with her. And through it all, Naomi remained focused on her vision. Building something sustainable, something meaningful, something that helped people. One evening, about 9 months after the divorce, Naomi stood in her apartment, looking at a news article on her tablet. Naomi Harris, from betrayed wife to business mogul. The article detailed her journey, discovering the affair, the divorce, taking control of the companies, starting the foundation. It painted her as a success story. But reading it, Naomi felt complicated. Yes, she'd succeeded. But the path to that success had been painful. She'd lost 12 years of her life to a marriage that had been a lie. She'd been betrayed by someone she'd loved. She'd had to become someone harder, tougher, more guarded than she'd ever wanted to be. Was that really success? Her phone rang. Simone. Did you see the article? Just finished reading it. You're famous now. How does it feel? Weird. Surreal. Sometimes I look around at my life and I don't recognize it. Is that a bad thing? Naomi thought about it. No. Just different. I'm different. Better different? Yeah, Naomi said, meaning it. Better different. Because even though the journey had been hard, even though she'd lost things she'd valued, she'd gained something more important, herself. The real Naomi, not the version who'd molded herself to fit Julian's needs. Not the version who'd stayed quiet and small. The version who knew her worth and refused to settle for less. That was worth everything she'd been through. Spring arrived in the city with a burst of color. Cherry blossoms lined the streets, and the air smelled fresh and promising. Naomi stood on her apartment balcony with her morning coffee, watching the city wake up below. It had been a year since she'd discovered Julian's affair. A year since her life had imploded and then rebuilt itself into something completely new. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, Foundation Gala tonight, 7 p.m. The gala was a fundraiser for the Harris Foundation. Over the past few months, word had spread about the work they were doing, and other people wanted to contribute. Tonight's event would raise additional funds and awareness. Naomi spent the day preparing. She had a hair appointment, a final meeting with the event planner, and a fitting for her dress, a stunning emerald green gown that made her feel like royalty. As she was getting ready that evening, Simone called. Are you nervous? A little. This is the first big public event I'm hosting as myself, not as Julian's wife. You're going to be amazing. Everyone's talking about the foundation. You're doing important work. I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. Naomi, you've helped over 200 women in less than a year. That's more than enough. At 7 p.m., Naomi arrived at the gala venue, a historic hotel ballroom with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. The room was already filling with guests. Business leaders, philanthropists, celebrities, and women who'd been helped by the foundation. As Naomi made her entrance, people turned to look. She walked through the crowd with her head high, shaking hands and greeting guests. She wasn't Julian Harris's ex-wife anymore. She was Naomi Harris, businesswoman and philanthropist. Mrs. Harris. A tall man with kind eyes approached her. I'm Trevor Mitchell. I run a tech company downtown. I wanted to personally thank you for what you're doing with the foundation. Thank you for coming, Mr. Mitchell. Please call me Trevor. My sister went through a difficult divorce last year. Your foundation helped her get back on her feet. She has her own place now and is starting a business. That's wonderful. What kind of business? Graphic design. She's always been talented, but her ex-husband convinced her she wasn't good enough to make money at it. Trevor smiled. She proved him wrong. And she says it's because your foundation gave her the confidence and resources to try. Naomi felt warmth spread through her chest. Stories like that are why I do this. Well, I brought a donation check tonight. It's not huge, but I hope it helps. Trevor handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. This is incredibly generous, Naomi said, surprised. It's nothing compared to what you've done. Plus, I have some ideas about how technology could help the foundation reach more women. If you're interested, I'd love to discuss them sometime. I'd like that. They exchanged business cards, and Trevor moved on to let other guests talk with Naomi. The evening proceeded beautifully. Dinner was served. Speeches were made. Several women who'd been helped by the foundation stood up and shared their stories. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. When it was Naomi's turn to speak, she stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces. "A year ago," she began, "I was at the lowest point of my life. I just discovered my husband had been cheating on me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and worthless. I thought my life was over." The room was silent. But I was wrong. My life wasn't over. It was just beginning. I realized I had a choice. I could let the betrayal destroy me, or I could use it to rebuild myself into someone stronger. Naomi paused, gathering her thoughts. I chose to rebuild. But I also realized I wasn't the only woman who'd ever felt that way. There are millions of women in bad relationships, in difficult marriages, in situations where they feel trapped and powerless. This foundation exists for them. To tell them they're not alone. To give them the resources to take their power back. Applause filled the room. Tonight, we've raised over $3 million. That money will go directly to helping women escape bad situations and build new lives. But more than the money, I hope we're sending a message: you are stronger than you think. You are worth more than anyone has told you. And you deserve to be happy. The applause grew louder as Naomi returned to her seat. People came up to her all evening, wanting to contribute, wanting to help, wanting to share their own stories. By the end of the night, Naomi was exhausted but fulfilled. This was what mattered. Not revenge against Julian, not proving she could run his businesses, but actually making a difference in people's lives. As guests were leaving, Trevor approached her again. "That was an incredible speech. Thank you. I meant what I said earlier. I'd really like to discuss how we could use technology to expand the foundation's reach. Maybe we could have coffee sometime?" Naomi hesitated. She hadn't thought about dating since the divorce. The idea of trusting someone again felt impossible. But Trevor seemed genuine. And it was just coffee. "I'd like that," she said. They met for coffee the following week at a cafe near Naomi's office. Trevor brought his laptop and showed her ideas for an app that could connect women with foundation resources. Legal help, financial planning, counseling, all in one place. The goal would be privacy and accessibility, Trevor explained. Women could access help without anyone knowing. Especially important for those in dangerous situations. Naomi was impressed. "This is brilliant. How much would it cost to develop?" "I'd like to donate my company's services. We'll build it for free." "That's too generous. My sister's life changed because of your foundation. This is how I can give back." They spent 2 hours discussing the app, brainstorming features, planning the development timeline. Naomi found herself enjoying the conversation, not just about work but about everything. Trevor was easy to talk to, funny, thoughtful. When they parted ways, Trevor said, "This was great. Would you want to have dinner sometime?" "Not about the foundation. Just dinner." Naomi's heart skipped. "Are you asking me on a date?" "I am. But I understand if you're not ready. I know you've been through a lot." Naomi thought about it. She wasn't sure if she was ready. But she also knew she couldn't hide from life forever. "Okay," she said. "Dinner sounds nice." Their first date was at a quiet Italian restaurant. Naomi felt nervous like a teenager again. But Trevor put her at ease, asking about her interests, her dreams, her foundation work. "Can I ask you something personal?" Trevor said over dessert. "Sure. Are you over your ex-husband?" Naomi considered the question carefully. "I'm over the betrayal. I'm over the anger. But I don't think you ever fully get over 12 years of your life. Those years happened. They shaped me. I just don't let them define me anymore." "That's a healthy way to look at it. What about you? What's your story?" Trevor smiled. "I was engaged once. She called it off 3 weeks before the wedding. Said she'd realized she didn't love me the way she should. I'm sorry." "Don't be. She was right. We would have been miserable. It hurt at the time, but now I'm grateful she was honest." They talked until the restaurant was closing, sharing stories, laughing, discovering they had more in common than expected. When Trevor walked Naomi to her car, he said, "I had a really good time tonight." "Me too. Can I see you again?" "I'd like that." Over the next few months, Naomi and Trevor saw each other regularly. Sometimes for work meetings about the foundation app. Sometimes for dinner or movies. Sometimes just for walks through the city. Naomi found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about her marriage to Julian, about discovering the affair, about the divorce and the foundation. Trevor listened without judgment, offering support but not pity. "You're remarkable," he told her one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the river. "Most people would have fallen apart. You built an empire. I didn't have a choice. It was rebuild or break. There's always a choice. You chose to be strong. Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling content in a way she hadn't in years. Being with Trevor was easy. He didn't try to control her or diminish her. He celebrated her successes and supported her goals. He was a partner, not a boss. But she was also scared. Scared of trusting again. Scared of being hurt again. Scared of letting someone get close enough to betray her. One night, Trevor seemed to sense her hesitation. You know I'm not Julian, right? I know. I would never cheat on you. I would never lie to you. I would never make you feel less than you are. How can I be sure? You can't. Not completely. Trust is always a risk. But I promise you I'm worth the risk. Naomi wanted to believe him. And slowly, day by day, she was learning to trust again. Meanwhile, her businesses continued to thrive. The warehouse district development was fully leased before it was even finished. Harris Tech Solutions had doubled in value. Harris Consulting was opening offices internationally. Articles were written about Naomi's business acumen. She was invited to speak at Harvard Business School, sharing her story with students. She was featured on the cover of Fortune magazine with the headline, "The Phoenix CEO, How Naomi Harris Turned Betrayal into Billions." Through it all, Naomi remained grounded. She remembered where she'd come from. She remembered the pain that had brought her here. And she was determined to use her success to help others. The foundation app Trevor had developed launched in the fall. Within weeks, thousands of women had downloaded it, accessing resources and support. Success stories poured in, women leaving abusive relationships, starting new businesses, finding independence. One evening, Naomi received an email from a woman named Grace. I was married to a man who controlled every aspect of my life. I had no money, no job, no way out. Your foundation's app gave me information about legal aid and shelters. I left him 3 months ago. I'm now living in my own apartment and working as a teacher's aide. Thank you for giving me hope when I had none. Naomi read the email with tears in her eyes. This was why she'd fought so hard. Not for revenge, not for money, but for moments like this. For women like Grace who needed someone to show them the way out. That night, Trevor came over for dinner. He'd become a regular presence in her life, and Naomi was starting to imagine a future with him. I have something to tell you, Trevor said over dinner. Naomi's heart skipped, worried. What? My company got acquired. For a lot of money? Trevor, that's amazing. Congratulations. Thank you. But here's the thing. I'm thinking about taking some time off. Maybe traveling. And I was hoping you might want to come with me. Naomi was surprised. Travel? I have businesses to run. You have excellent executives who can handle things for a few weeks. Come on, Naomi. When's the last time you took a vacation? She couldn't remember. Even her honeymoon with Julian had been cut short because of a business emergency. Where would we go? Anywhere you want. Paris, Tokyo, Bali. Your choice. Naomi thought about it. The idea of leaving her carefully constructed world was terrifying. But it was also exciting. Okay, she said. Let's do it. They planned a month-long trip through Europe. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, and London. Naomi delegated responsibilities to her executive teams and forced herself to let go of control. The trip was transformative. Naomi discovered she could step away without everything falling apart. She discovered she could relax without constantly checking her phone. She discovered she could be happy without being productive every moment. And she discovered she was falling in love with Trevor. In Paris, walking along the Seine at sunset, Trevor took her hand. I love you, Naomi. I know it's fast and I know you might not be ready to hear that. But I need you to know. Naomi felt tears in her eyes. I love you too. And that terrifies me. Because of Julian? Because I trusted him and he destroyed that trust. How do I know you won't do the same? You don't. But Naomi, you can't live your whole life protecting yourself from being hurt. Sometimes you have to take a chance on happiness. That night, Naomi made a choice. She chose to trust. She chose to love. She chose to believe that not all men were like Julian. It was the scariest and bravest thing she'd done since the divorce. While Naomi was in Europe with Trevor, events back home were reaching a climax. Patricia called with an update. Julian's trial starts next week, Patricia said. The prosecutor wants to know if you're willing to testify. Naomi was sitting in a cafe in Barcelona, warm sunshine on her face. The idea of returning home to testify against Julian felt like stepping back into darkness. Do they need me? They have all the documents I provided. They have evidence, but your testimony would be powerful. You can speak to his character, his behavior, his deliberate attempts to hide assets. Naomi thought about it. Part of her wanted to be done with Julian forever. But another part knew that testifying was the right thing to do. I'll do it, she said. When do I need to be back? Trial starts Monday. You should be here by Sunday. Naomi explained the situation to Trevor, who immediately understood. This is important. We should go back. I don't want to cut our trip short because of him. We're not cutting it short because of him. We're going back because you're doing the right thing. There's a difference. They flew back Saturday night. On Sunday, Naomi met with the prosecutor to prepare for her testimony. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Reynolds, went over what she'd ask and how Naomi should answer. Just tell the truth. That's all we need. What if his lawyer tries to make me look vindictive? He will. He'll try to paint you as an angry ex-wife who's out for revenge. But the evidence speaks for itself. You didn't create the offshore accounts. You didn't hide the money. You just discovered it and reported it. Monday morning, Naomi dressed in a conservative navy suit and headed to the courthouse. Patricia met her outside. You ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. Inside the courtroom, Julian sat at the defense table looking pale and thin. He'd lost weight, and his expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. When he saw Naomi, his expression hardened. The trial had already been going for a few days. The prosecution had presented financial records, testimony from accountants, and evidence of Julian's offshore accounts. Now it was time for Naomi's testimony. She was sworn in and took the stand. The courtroom felt too hot, too bright, too exposed. Ms. Reynolds began with basic questions. Mrs. Harris, how long were you married to the defendant? 12 years. During that time, were you aware of his business dealings? Not the details. Julian kept me separate from his work. He said I didn't need to worry about it. When did you first become aware of the offshore accounts? Naomi explained how she'd discovered Julian's affair and then started investigating their finances. How she'd found documents in his office. How she'd accessed his computer files. And what did you find? Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Shell companies in Delaware. Properties purchased under false names. Money moving in ways that didn't make sense for legitimate business. What did you do with this information? I documented everything and gave it to my divorce lawyer. Later, I provided it to law enforcement. Why did you provide it to law enforcement? Because I realized Julian wasn't just hiding assets from me. He was hiding them from the government. He was breaking the law. Julian's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He was a slick man in an expensive suit, with cold eyes and a practiced smile. Mrs. Harris, isn't it true that you were angry at my client for having an affair? Yes. And isn't it true that you wanted to punish him? I wanted him to face consequences for his actions. Consequences? Or revenge? There's a difference. Revenge is about hurting someone out of spite. Consequences are about holding someone accountable for their actions. You took 60% of his assets in the divorce. Wasn't that revenge? No. That was a fair settlement based on my family's initial investment in his business and my contributions to the marriage. But you also went to the police. You could have just taken your settlement and moved on. Instead, you tried to have him arrested. I didn't try to have him arrested. I reported crimes that I'd discovered. That was my responsibility as a citizen. Or as a vindictive ex-wife? Ms. Reynolds objected. Your Honor, counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Move on, counselor. Julian's lawyer tried a different approach. Mrs. Harris, did you ever benefit from these so-called illegal activities? No. But you lived in a house paid for with money from these accounts. I lived in a house that I believed was paid for with legitimate business income. I had no knowledge of where the money actually came from. How convenient. It's the truth. The lawyer paced in front of the stand. Mrs. Harris, isn't it true that you only reported these activities after your marriage fell apart? When you were still happily married, you had no problem with how your husband made his money. I didn't know how he made his money. And I wasn't happily married. I was married to someone who lied to me every day. Objection, Your Honor. Non-responsive. I'll allow it, the judge said. Julian's lawyer tried for another hour, but Naomi held firm. She told the truth clearly and calmly. She didn't get emotional. She didn't get defensive. She simply stated facts. When she finally stepped down from the stand, she felt drained but relieved. She'd done her part. Over the next week, the trial continued. More witnesses testified. More evidence was presented. Naomi didn't attend most of it. She'd said what she needed to say. But she was there for the verdict. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the courtroom was packed with reporters, interested parties, and people who'd been affected by Julian's crimes. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." The foreman stood and read from a paper. "On the count of tax evasion, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of money laundering, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of fraud, we find the defendant guilty." The foreman continued reading. "Guilty, guilty, guilty." Julian's face went white. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but Julian shook it off. He looked around the courtroom wildly, and his eyes landed on Naomi. The look he gave her was full of hate and blame. Like this was all her fault. Like she'd committed the crimes instead of just reporting them. Naomi met his gaze steadily. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just looked at him, letting him see that she was unmoved by his anger. The judge set a sentencing date for a month later. Julian was remanded to custody immediately, unable to make bail. As officers led him away in handcuffs, he kept looking back at Naomi. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Naomi had prepared a brief statement. "Justice was served today. My ex-husband committed serious crimes and he's being held accountable. I hope this sends a message that no one is above the law, no matter how wealthy or powerful they are." "Do you feel vindicated?" a reporter called out. "I feel like the truth came out. That's what matters." Patricia guided Naomi through the crowd to a waiting car. Once inside, Naomi let out a long breath. "It's over," Patricia said. "Really over this time." "I know. How do you feel?" Naomi thought about it. Sad. Relieved. Exhausted. All at once. "That's normal. You've been living in this for over a year. Now you can finally move forward completely." That evening, Trevor took Naomi to dinner at a quiet restaurant. She told him about the verdict, about testifying, about seeing Julian led away in handcuffs. "Do you think he'll serve time?" Trevor asked. "Probably. The crimes were serious and he showed no remorse. The judge won't be lenient." "And how do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I don't feel anything. Not happy, not sad. Just nothing. Julian made his choices. Now he has to live with them. That's a healthy attitude." Naomi smiled. "Therapy helps. I've been seeing someone for the past few months. Working through everything." "That's good. I'm proud of you." Over the next few weeks, Naomi focused on her businesses and foundation. She tried not to think about Julian or the trial or any of it. But she couldn't completely avoid it. The sentencing hearing was coming up and part of her felt like she needed to be there. Trevor offered to come with her, but Naomi went alone. This was something she needed to face by herself. The courtroom was less crowded this time. Julian sat at the defense table wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked defeated, broken in a way Naomi had never seen. The judge reviewed the case and then addressed Julian directly. "Mr. Harris, you were a successful businessman with every advantage. You chose to break the law not out of necessity but out of greed. You showed no remorse for your actions. You tried to blame others, including your ex-wife, for your own crimes." Julian started to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "I've heard enough from you. The law is clear. Your crimes are serious and were committed over many years. I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 8 years. You are also ordered to pay restitution of $35 million to the government for unpaid taxes and penalties." 12 years. The same length as their marriage. Julian's shoulders slumped. His lawyer whispered something to him, but Julian just shook his head. As the officers prepared to take Julian away, he turned and looked at Naomi one last time. This time there was no anger in his eyes. Just defeat and resignation. Naomi felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her felt satisfaction that justice had been served. But part of her just felt sad for the waste of it all. Julian had thrown away everything, his freedom, his wealth, his reputation. For what? For an affair that had lasted barely a year? For money he didn't even need? It seemed so pointless. Outside the courthouse, Patricia was waiting. 12 years. That's a serious sentence. He earned it. Are you okay? I think so. It's weird. I spent so long being angry at him, wanting him to face consequences. Now that he has, I just feel empty. That's the thing about revenge, Patricia said. It never feels as satisfying as you think it will. Real satisfaction comes from building something new, not tearing down something old. Naomi nodded. Patricia was right. The best part of the past year hadn't been watching Julian fall. It had been watching herself rise. That night, Naomi stood in her apartment looking out at the city lights. A year ago, she'd stood in almost this same spot, watching Julian celebrate at the restaurant with Bianca. She'd been planning her revenge, gathering her strength, preparing for battle. Now the battle was over. Julian was in prison. Bianca had disappeared, her reputation ruined. Naomi had her businesses, her foundation, and Trevor. She'd won. Completely and totally. So why did it feel so hollow? Her phone rang. Trevor. How are you doing? I don't know. Confused, I think. Want to talk about it? Can you come over? 20 minutes later, Trevor arrived with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. They sat on her couch, eating from boxes and talking. I thought I'd feel different when this was all over, Naomi admitted. I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated or something. But I just feel tired. That makes sense. You've been fighting for over a year. Now that the fight is over, you're feeling the exhaustion. It's more than that. I spent so much energy on revenge, taking his businesses, testifying against him, watching him fall. But now that he's actually in prison, I realize it didn't heal anything. I'm still the person who got cheated on. I still have those scars. Trevor set down his food and took her hand. Naomi, revenge was never going to heal you. Only time and work and building a new life can do that. But here's what I see. You didn't just get revenge. You transformed yourself. You became a successful business owner. You started a foundation that's helping hundreds of women. You learned to trust again. That's the real victory. Naomi felt tears in her eyes. You're right. I've been so focused on Julian that I forgot to look at myself. Look at yourself now. Really look. You're amazing. Naomi did look. She looked at the woman she'd become. Strong. Independent. Successful. Kind. Generous. A woman who used her pain to help others. A woman who rebuilt herself from nothing. That woman was worth celebrating. Patricia told me he's up for early parole in 6 years if he behaves. He's been working in the prison library apparently. Teaching other inmates to read. How do you feel about that? Naomi thought about it. I hope he finds some kind of peace. I hope he learns from his mistakes. But mostly, I just don't think about him anymore. He's not part of my life. That's healthy. It took a long time to get here. For a while, I was so consumed by anger and the need for revenge. But I realized that real revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about building yourself up so high that they can't touch you anymore. You definitely did that. Naomi smiled. I did, didn't I? I took his businesses and made them better. I started a foundation that's changing lives. I found love again. I created a life I'm proud of. What happened to Bianca? Last I heard, she moved to another state. Started over somewhere new. Good for her, I guess. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Naomi said, You know what's funny? When Julian took Bianca to that restaurant to celebrate our divorce, he thought he was winning. He thought he'd gotten everything he wanted. But he lost everything that mattered. And I gained everything I didn't even know I needed. Like what? Like self-respect. Like confidence. Like the knowledge that I'm capable of so much more than I ever imagined. Julian spent our entire marriage making me feel small. He told me I didn't understand business, that I wasn't smart enough, that I should just be grateful for what he provided. Naomi looked at Trevor. But I am smart. I am capable. And I don't need anyone to provide for me. I can provide for myself. That's the Naomi Harris I fell in love with. Over the next few months, Naomi and Trevor planned their wedding. It would be small and intimate, just close friends and family. No press. No spectacle. Just two people who loved each other, promising to build a life together. Naomi's businesses continued to thrive. The warehouse district development had won awards for sustainable design. Harris Tech Solutions had gone public, making Naomi's net worth climb even higher. Harris Consulting was now operating on 3 continents. The foundation was also growing. They'd helped over 1,500 women in 2 years. Success stories poured in daily, women starting businesses, finishing degrees, finding jobs, leaving bad relationships, discovering their strength. One afternoon, Naomi received a letter. It was from the prison where Julian was being held. She almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of her. Dear Naomi, the letter began. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you. But I wanted to write anyway, not because I expect forgiveness, but because I owe you the truth. Naomi continued reading. Being in prison has given me a lot of time to think. About my choices. About what I threw away. About how badly I hurt you. I was selfish and arrogant. I thought I was invincible. I thought I could do whatever I wanted without consequences. I was wrong about everything. Wrong about business. Wrong about Bianca. Wrong about you. You were the best thing in my life and I destroyed it. Thank you for being there through all of it. Always. The ceremony was short and sweet. Trevor and Naomi exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising partnership, respect, and love. When the officiant said, "You may kiss," Trevor pulled Naomi close and kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because to him she was. The reception was full of laughter and dancing. Naomi's executive teams were there, along with women from the foundation, friends, and family. Everyone celebrated not just a wedding but a new chapter. During her speech, Naomi raised her glass and said, "2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I was wrong. It was just beginning. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. Here's to new beginnings, second chances, and the courage to rebuild." Everyone cheered and drank. That night, as Naomi and Trevor drove to the hotel where they'd spend their first night as a married couple, Naomi felt complete peace. She'd gone through hell and come out stronger. She'd been betrayed and chose to build instead of break. She'd been hurt and chose to heal. "What are you thinking about?" Trevor asked, holding her hand. "About how sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. If Julian hadn't cheated, I never would have discovered my own strength. I never would have started the foundation. I never would have met you." "Are you saying you're grateful he cheated?" "No. I'm saying I'm grateful for who I became in spite of it." "That's beautiful." I also realized something else. Revenge isn't about hurting the person who hurt you. Real revenge is living a life so amazing that they realize what they lost. Julian is in prison, but even if he wasn't, my success would still be the best revenge. Because I proved that I never needed him. I was always enough on my own. Trevor kissed her hand. "You were always enough. You just had to believe it." 6 months later, Naomi stood in her office, looking at a magazine spread about the fastest growing companies in the country. Harris Industries was number 3. Harris Tech Solutions was number 7. Her phone rang. "Patricia. Did you see the news?" Patricia asked. "What news?" "Julian's parole hearing. He was denied. They said he hadn't shown sufficient rehabilitation." Naomi felt a small twinge of something. Not satisfaction, not sadness. Just acknowledgement. "Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else is there to say? He made his choices. The parole board made theirs. None of it affects my life anymore. You really have moved on, haven't you?" "Completely. Julian is my past. Trevor is my present and future. My businesses are thriving. My foundation is helping people. I'm happy, Patricia. Really, genuinely happy. That's the best revenge of all." After hanging up, Naomi walked to the window. The warehouse district development was visible in the distance, bustling with life. Families lived there now. Businesses operated there. It was a thriving community built from nothing. Just like her. Her office door opened and Trevor walked in with lunch. "Hey, beautiful. Thought you might be hungry." Naomi smiled and kissed him. "Starving." They ate lunch together, talking about their plans for the weekend, about the foundation gala next month, about maybe starting a family soon. Normal things. Happy things. Things that had nothing to do with revenge or betrayal or the past. As Naomi sat with her husband, eating sandwiches and laughing at his jokes, she realized something profound. Victory wasn't about watching your enemies fall. Victory was about rising so high that you stopped thinking about enemies at all. She'd spent months planning revenge against Julian. But the real revenge had been building a life so fulfilling that he became irrelevant. Her businesses were worth 3 times what they'd been under his management. Her foundation had helped thousands of women. She'd found love with someone who truly valued her. She'd discovered capabilities she never knew she had. That was the victory. Not Julian in prison. Not Bianca's ruined reputation. Not the money or the power or the public vindication. The victory was Naomi Harris, strong, successful, happy, and free. And that was worth more than any revenge could ever be.